Hello everyone, welcome back to the Loco Builder. Long time no see, as I suppose they say, but life got in the way a bit and I've been a bit busy lately, but I've managed to get some time back in my schedule now, so let's just crack straight on with this model, this lovely A1 kit from DJH, and see how we go with it. I won't set any targets for the video, we'll just record and we'll just see what we can do, and hopefully we'll have some fun. So last video, which was about, I don't know, 6 months ago or more, we got this chassis running, we've got it really nice and sweet, we've got all the pickups working and everything else like that, so we're happy with that. So I'm going to put that aside now, and what I want to do is work on the body, and I've been doing that all morning, that's why my hands are a bit grubby, and here's the body now. You can see what I've done to it. I've basically spent an awful lot of time just cleaning this up and getting it ready for assembly, and you'll notice that I removed all of the boiler blands. I've also drilled the holes here for the handrails, drilled the pilot holes on the top here for chimney, the dome, the safety valves there. So all of that's ready and done. And if I can just show you that, hopefully, there we go, that's just showing how nice and smooth that is. But that's a lot of work to do that. I didn't show that on camera because it's quite boring. It's basically just filing and sanding and all that sort of stuff, but we just want to get this into a nice smooth condition. I just wanted to show you a before and after as well. I've got this other kit, other DJH A1 that I'll be building at a later date, and this is the original condition of the boiler and the smoke box there. So you can see the boiler bands on there. The reason that I've removed them is because I feel that they're overscale, and when I come to put the transfers on for the lining, the transfer paper will be thick enough that gives you the impression of those boiler bands. So I've removed them on this one, and you can see there the difference between the two. Hopefully it looks better. Just trying to get the angle right. There we go. Hopefully it looks better now, and we've still preserved all of that lovely raised detail there. I did lose a couple of rivets off the top, but we'll replace those later on, and I'll probably show you that as we go. So that's the boiler all cleaned up. Now, just want to move on to the footplate. We'll talk about clean up now actually. So this side here, if I can just show you that. There we are. I've cleaned up this side nicely now, so that's all done. And this just takes time. The more time you spend cleaning stuff up, the better your model's going to be. On this side, you can see that these sort of feed nibs under here are still in place, and they all need to be removed. And the other really important thing about this, the footplate, is to make sure that it's perfectly square, and we don't want any sort of lateral twist in it whatsoever, and we also want all of these lines to be straight. So you just need to take your time to ensure that everything on there is parallel and straight. In terms of the tools then that I use for cleaning up the model, first of all, it's really move that one out of the way. Really a selection of files. I've got sort of small square files, I've got a triangular file here, I've got sort of, I think this is a warding file, I think that's what it's called, but quite a rough cut on the warding file. That's for my sort of the large bits of material that I need to remove. I've got a larger square file here, and then I've got a selection of smaller files. That's a half round file there. I've got a square file here, that's particularly useful. For, if I just show you on the model here, going underneath like so, just really helpful just along those edges, just to butt up and square up in there. So that's a square file there. Also got a little triangular file here as well. Pop that down. Another really useful tool is this is called a graver, and again I can just slide that underneath there like so, just with light pressure, and just carve off tiny little bits of metal just to square up underneath that footplate there. So that's called a graver, most useful indeed. Then another really useful tool is a scalpel blade, and again you can just scrape under there like so, and I'll show you that in a second when we do some cleanup. So a scalpel blade there. Obviously one of these polishing brushes, I can't remember the name of that, sort of like a glass fibre brush, there we go, glass fibre brush is useful. And then I also use these, which are just sanding sticks. and they're really, really useful just for polishing off the metal. They're a bit softer than files, so you're less likely to scratch and leave indents in the metal. So let's crack on now, and I'll show you how to remove some of these bits of unnecessary moulding detail there that we can get rid of on the model. So we need to start off then by removing these feed nibs, basically is what they are, and I've removed all the other stuff from the other side here, but these are the feed nibs. So basically just get in there, and I've got this rough file, this warding file here, and all I'm doing is just working on these slowly but surely, and it's best just to basically check, do a little bit of filing, then check once again, a bit more filing. You don't want to just go mad with it, and then, so once I can still see there's a little bit of a ridge on that, but not too much. I'm going to get rid of that fatter file, if you like, and I'm going to change to a smaller one. And I quite like this triangular one. It's still quite a big file, but it's a finer cut. And I'm just resting that on there, like so. And you know when it's done, because you can see there, I'll show you, all kind of goes smooth, and it all becomes the same colour, so you know when you're at the right level. And that's when I just change now to a little sanding stick, just to polish that off a bit, like that. So that's good for the underside. Hopefully you can see that's nice and shiny there. And then we just need to remove this bit here. I'll just bring you a little bit closer to see this. So there we are, then we've just brought you in a little bit so you can see this. You can see that the underside there is done. So that's nice and smooth, but we've now got this rather annoying lip there. So what I'm going to do, and it also goes into the beading as well, which makes it doubly difficult to remove. So this is the case where we need to use our scalpel. I'm just going to pop that down there, check that I'm doing the right one, and then basically what I want to do is just with a rocking motion, that's why it's nice to have a curved scalpel blade, is just rock backwards and forwards to cut down level with the beading there. And then what I'm going to do is turn this up the right way. There we go. And then again, I'm just going to align the scalpel at the edge of the piece of metal there and just rock gently backwards and forwards. Not too much pressure. White metal's quite soft, remember. Rocking backwards and forwards, gently, gently, gently. And you can see we're starting to make a little cut there. Then I'm going to go back to the top. Just putting the scalpel in there once again. And then I'll work again from the bottom. There we are. And we've removed that quite nicely, as you can see there. And all we need to do now is go in and clean up. And what we'll do is use the graver for that. So just put this on its side like that. And then the graver just goes in, and we just kind of very gently like that. Just start to square that off. And you just carry on like that. And you just go back with your scalpel, carefully cutting. I mean, really these feed nibs shouldn't be like that. They shouldn't interfere with this beading detail, but they have. The moulds have got old over time, and that's why it's straight into there. But that's how you clean up those little feed nibs there. Now, I just want to show you while we're also tightly zoomed in as well here. There's a bit of flash here, and you sometimes get a bit of flash from the moulding. And just to show you how to clean that up again, I use the scalpel once more, and it's simply a case of kind of slicing that away like that. and you're just kind of slicing and scraping as you go to kind of get rid of that excess flash and just clean up the model. So using a selection of files, your scalpel, your various other tools, get this chassis cleaned up. I'll carry on working on that now because it's quite boring, and then we'll try and do a bit of soldering and get things moving along. I've now taken this on a few steps further. As you can see, I've pretty much finished off the detailing on the body of this locomotive. I've fitted most of the handrails on both sides. Also fitted the chimney, the dome. I'll show you how to fit that in a moment. I fitted this pipe here. I've also changed the incorrect round washout plugs there for the oval ones. I just made those parts out of brass, and I've also added some 1/2 mil brass rod just in the fuse plugs there, just to give a bit more texture and a bit more detail. What I'm going to show you now though is the basic technique for actually fitting the handrails, and this technique is the exact same technique that I use to attach all the other brass bits to the white metal body. What we need to do is tin first the brass part that we're going to actually be using. So just coat the end in flux. I'm using my standard 145 melting point solder. I just pick up a tiny amount of that on the end of the iron and introduce it to the handrail knob. I do both sides, and then what I do is go once more in with the flux and swipe with the iron like that, and what that does is just kind of evens out the coating of solder on the handrail knob and means that we can fit it nicely into the hole. Do the second one. So now I've got my 0.4 mil brass wire, and I'm just going to give that a very cursory clean with my glass fibre brush just to help our soldering as much as possible. The cleaner your metal is, the easier it is to solder. So thread both of the handrail knobs onto the 0.4 mil brass wire, and then at one end we're just going to apply more flux. It's a phosphoric acid based flux, slightly diluted, and again just picking up a tiny amount of solder on the end of the iron there, and we're just going to place the iron to the right of the handrail knob and then solder in like that. That's now nicely in place. We've got a bit of excess solder here, so what we're going to do, once more, a bit more flux, and swipe like that, and you can see, I hope you can see anyway, just how that has changed. If that's picking up, I don't know whether it's in focus or not. Very tiny. Just means that's nice and even now coated. Just get these photo etch shears here and just cut off the end like that, and we've now got a nice clean handrail joint end to solder onto our model. There. So now what we want to do is just place the handrail knob onto the side of the model and just see that it looks about right. Now I've got quite a lot of excess wire here, so I'm just going to cut that down, so we've probably got about 7 or 8 mil left over. That's going to be sacrificial, that little bit, and we're going to use that to clean up as we did before. So now we've got a handrail on there that looks pretty straight to me. Always check things. I've turned the iron down now to about 250, and we're now going to solder the handrails to the actual body of the locomotive itself. So if you can see inside, I apply plenty of flux. I just hold it with my finger, and now I'm using my low melt solder, which melts at about 80 degrees. Got a reasonable amount on there, and I can carry this to the work on the soldering iron tip. It's got no flux in it. That's the difference with constructional soldering. And just solder in like so, just to tack it in place. I just want to see that it looks straight and parallel, and hopefully there you can see that it is. Now I'm going to move to the other end, still at 250 Celsius, flux, bit of solder, and there we go. You'll feel the heat coming through onto your fingers, and what we've got there now is a really lovely joint, because I can see just at the edge there's a little ring of solder that's come through, and that means that that is beautifully held in place. Now I'm going to do the same at the original end. A bit more flux on the outside also. Touch more low melt, there we are. And again, that's come through beautifully. And if anything, that's probably come through a bit too much, so I'll show you how you can remove some of it. So just put flux on the outside, flux on the inside. Now I have to hold it away from you, I'm afraid. Clean the soldering iron tip, and we can simply suck the solder back in. There we are. That looks lovely. Now, we just need to finish off this bit, so we now need to turn the iron back up to around 380. So, flux on the end there. And just a tiny amount now of the 145 solder. There we are, just on the tip like that. And then the lightest of touches, just like so. Move the iron in once again. There. And now, simply snip off the excess like we did before. And there's your perfectly placed handrail wire. Probably more by luck than judgment we managed to get it straight first time, and then just go in with the glass fibre brush and clean up. So the technique for soldering on the main handrail wire is exactly the same as I just showed you for the smaller one there. I just thread all 8 of the handrail pillars onto the piece of brass wire and then solder them into their pre-drilled holes. Now I want to show you how to attach white metal to white metal. It's a slightly different technique, and we'll just get the dome attached to the model now. First of all, we want to make sure that everything's been given a thorough clean. I just use a very fine sanding stick just to clean the top of the model like so. We want everything to be as clean as it possibly can to help the solder to flow. And also, I need to clean the underside of the dome here. I've got the iron set to 260 Celsius, which is quite warm for white metal, but I'm fairly confident in doing this. If you're not quite so confident, then just have the temperature a bit low. It just means it takes a bit longer to get the heat into the part. So I'm going to tin the actual dome itself, a bit of white metal on there, on the end of the iron. I'll probably just hold it with something. There we go. Just applying the solder to it quite roughly, just to give it a little coating. On there like that. So that's pre-tinned. Now we position it onto the model and apply lots and lots of flux. We're just going to go initially for a tack joint in there. So hopefully you can see inside. I think you can. Yeah, there we go. Pick up a blob of white metal solder, and now I've just applied a very rough tack joint into the inside of that, just to hold the dome, just to see how it looks. That's not too bad. And now what I'll do is go in, solder from the inside, and just apply plenty of heat inside, minding that I don't touch the iron on the edge of the boiler casting there, otherwise I might ruin it. I'm starting to get some solder flowing through now, so I just need to keep on with this and flood it because I've got quite a large gap there to fill. But it will go through. I've just made a couple of little solder pellets there. You can see those, you just make them by cutting through the low melt solder with the soldering iron, and it just helps you to carry a little bit more solder to the piece of work. So just drop that inside like that, push it into the right position, and then you can just melt in, and basically it's a case of just continually adding flux, adding solder until you fill the gap that you want to fill. There we are. Now I just need to clean that back, and that's how you solder white metal to white metal and fill the gaps at the same time. You'll be pleased to know we're finally in a position now to solder the boiler onto the chassis casting now, so we can just get rid of the cab that I made earlier. And what I'll do is just make up a few little solder pellets so that we can use them later on for the soldering. So I've got the iron on at 250 Celsius there, and all we're going to do, this is just low melt solder here, and all you do is to make these pellets you just cut through like that and then just shake the bit of solder off, and you just let it drop onto a piece of wood like that, and you just make up some little solder blobs, and you can use those later on to solder everything together. I've fixed one end of the boiler with a screw that I've just tapped into the inside of the boiler like that, so that makes this a lot easier to fix. And then what we need to do is solder this back part on to the actual chassis itself. So first of all, I've already cleaned it up. I'm just going to go in with a bit of flux there like so, and instead of using one of my pellets, I'm just going to use a blob of white metal solder on the inside there just to tack it into position, just like that. So now that's tacked in, I can just make sure that this is sitting centrally on here. That the key, when you're soldering on key components like this, is just to check everything and take your time. And I think that looks pretty good as far as I can see. So now I'm going to put another tack joint on this side. Like that, and now we can start the soldering proper, and this is where we use our little pellets. So just plenty of flux inside, and then we just drop a little pellet in like that. And we start to introduce the heat. And what we're looking for is for the solder to come through onto the other side. We're not quite flowing through just yet, so a bit more flux. I'm just going to work on the other side so we're not too uneven. In goes the pellet. And just keep working with the iron. And if it's not quite flowing through, we just add a bit more solder and a bit more flux. And now I hope you can see that by working that solder through there, we've got the solder coming through on this side, which is exactly what we want. And now I can start work on bringing that back in so that we have virtually no cleanup to do whatsoever, and we just apply heat from the opposite side now. So now that's absolutely secure on the base of the model there. There's no chance of that ever coming off, and all we need to do is clean up those joints and see how it looks. Now the boiler's in place, we can start to get this cab tacked on as well. You'll notice I've already tinned the back of it and also the underside as well. And just to help, I've drilled some holes in the underside of the frame so that we can actually solder from below and try and get this cab nicely secure. So I'm going to just place the cab where I think it should go, approximately. Hold it in, and I'm just going to tack underneath. So again, I'm just making sure it's perfectly lined up in exactly the right position. Some flux in there, and you probably can't see particularly well what I'm doing here, but I'm just picking up a little bit of white metal solder, just tacking it in from the underside with a reasonable blob of this solder. There we are. See how it looks. Actually looks quite good. I'm fairly happy with that actually. So now I'm actually going to solder in from the underside.
Like a bird on a tree, I'm just sitting here. I got time, it's clear to see. From up here, the world seems small. We can sit together. It's so beautiful, you and me. We meant to be in the great outdoors, forever free. Sometimes you need to go and take a step back to see the truth around you. From a distance you can tell.
After much soldering and messing around, we finally get to this stage. It's pretty much 95% secure onto the chassis now. The cab is nicely fixed in place, everything's square, the roof fits nicely, and I just need to go back and do a little bit of tidying up, just maybe make some of those joints a little bit better, remove any excess solder, but that is the basic principle of how you construct the body and the chassis. I hope you've enjoyed the video, maybe learned a little bit here and there along the way. Remember to subscribe if you enjoyed the channel, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye bye.